fantastic. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone enjoyed today's sessions. We are so thrilled that you guys have joined us for the pre-law conference, and we are so thrilled to be into our next session, our keynote session. We are excited to have Judge Machelle Sweeting from the New York Supreme Court here with us to present the keynote address. As we get started, I do want to remind everyone that this is recording. We are streaming it through other sources as well. So, just keep that in mind. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A period at the end of Judge Sweeting's remarks. So without further ado, I'm so excited to have Judge Sweeting here with us. Judge Sweeting was elected from the historic 10th Municipal Court District in Harlem, New York, and currently serves as acting justice of the New York State Supreme Court. Judge Sweeting previously provided for 5 years in the New York Family Court on cases involving disputes about child custody, visitation, guardianship, and domestic violence. In addition, she presided over the nation's first statewide remote access court that allowed litigants to appear before the court via video. Throughout her legal career, Judge Sweeting has remained steadfast in her commitment to ensuring that equality and justice remain at the forefront of our legal system. Prior to ascending to the bench, she served with distinction as an administrative law judge, a special referee, an assistant corporation counsel, an assistant district attorney, law clerk to a Supreme Court and appellate justice, and as an adjunct law professor. Judge Sweeting earned her law degree from Rutgers University School of Law in Newark, New Jersey, and received a certificate of legal education from the Eugene Dupuc Law School in Nassau, Bahamas. Judge Sweeting is the first and only legal practitioner admitted to practice law in New York State, including the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York, Washington, D.C., the United States Supreme Court, the Second and Fourth Circuit Courts of Appeals, and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Judge Sweeting has held leadership positions in several local, state, and national organizations, including, but not limited to, the Family Court Judges Association of New York City and New York State, the National Bar Association, the New York Women's Bar Association, the Association of Black Women Attorneys, the Metropolitan Black Bar Association, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, and the NAACP Mid-Manhattan Branch. Judge Sweeting continues to inspire a new generation of civic-minded progressive community leaders to pursue a career in law, and we are so pleased to have her with us today to speak to all of you. Judge Sweeting.
Good afternoon. I want to thank Phi Alpha Delta for the opportunity to be a part of this annual pre-law conference. It is truly an honor and a privilege, and I was told that you have the most enthusiastic pre-law students who are in this year's conference. Some of them are so excited and engaged that after completing the first day of this conference, they're ready to bypass the bar exam and start practicing law ready today. There are some who said, well, they may have some reservations, but I'm hoping after speaking with them today, any reservations they have will absolutely be removed. This is the first time I know that this conference is being held virtually, and it could not have been done without the leadership and vision of your executive director, none other than Andrew Sagan, and your deputy director, who gave me such a wonderful introduction, none other than Emily Baranowski. Now, I know they work with a wonderful team, some of whom I just got to meet today, and I want to say hello and thank you to all of you. And I most certainly must recognize Miss Debbie Shannon, who helped put all of this together. Now, many of you I know are toggling right now between listening to me and all other devices. You're checking the pulse of the nation, and you're also checking your own pulse, doing that at the same time as we await the results of the election and what it will mean for our country and our own lives. So I'm aware that in this period of uncertainty, there's no other time in our history where the ideals and the principles of Phi Alpha Delta are most important. They have the ideals of compassion, courage, diversity, integrity, professionalism, and service. So your presence at this convention symbolizes to me and symbolizes most certainly to our country and to the legal profession that therein still remains hope. You're living, breathing proof that there's still people who dare to dream. Notwithstanding everything that's going on around us, there are still people like you who believe and who actually know that there's something inside you that, if properly cultivated, fully developed, and if you're given the opportunity, you will use what gifts and talents you have to make a difference in this world. And so much has changed. So much has changed since some of you have started school until now, but it's during times like this that I encourage you to go back to the basics. What do I mean by that? The 5 W's. The basics are the who, what, where, when, and why. You may be asking yourself in times like this, who am I? What am I doing? Well, I had to ask myself those questions early in life, and that's because I was born with a dislocated hip and told that I would never walk. I was the youngest of 3 children, and my family lived in what's called the Polo Ground houses in Harlem. Now, there are some of you who are not from New York, so I'll just translate that for you. That means I was born poor. There were things that I had that caused me to be disillusioned, and I believed that I would never rise above my circumstance. That's because 1, I was born disabled. 2, I was born as a person of color. Thirdly, I was born female. Fourthly, and the biggest 4-letter word, I was born poor. And then fifthly, even being the youngest child gave me no consolation, because all it meant to me is that I never got to buy my own clothes, that I had to wait for my brother or my sister to outgrow theirs so I could get their hand-me-downs. While this may have been the prelude to my story, it most certainly was not my end. My home is where I was able to escape. I was able to escape because, notwithstanding what doctors had predicted, that is, that I would never walk, not only did I walk, but through osteopathic therapy, I joined a neighborhood track team and I began to run. And I began to run and set records in the 400 and 800 meter dash. It was also in my home that, in addition to the athletic and physical disabilities, that I was able to overcome my circumstance. That's because in my home, we were surrounded by books. There were these commercials when I grew up, and the commercial would say, you can get a free gift if you would sign up or buy some product or some subscription. So I signed up, that is, for encyclopedias, knowing my parents couldn't afford to buy them, but I signed up for them anyway. Why? Because they came with a free gift of a thesaurus and a dictionary. And I relied on the seller's promise that 1, I could cancel at any time, and 2, even if I canceled, I could keep that free gift of that dictionary and that thesaurus. Now, I don't know if I ever won or lost that first case, but to this day, my parents still have those encyclopedias inside the home. Who knew that a girl who was once told that she would never walk would one day run, that is, run for judge and be elected to serve on the New York State Supreme Court? I use that story as a catalyst for you to ask yourself, who are you? And what is it that you would like to achieve? Who you are is not to be defined by others, but through perseverance, you too can overcome anything. Now, that's my personal story, but I understand that many of you will be writing your own personal stories in the form of personal statements as you apply to law school. So now what? The question becomes, what is it that you want? And you have to be honest with yourself. Honest enough to say it's okay that you don't know the answer. Sometimes the answers are not obvious or immediately apparent, which is why you had that session, I'm aware, at this conference on exploring career alternatives. known as lawternatives. And that's okay because you're still in what I describe as the incubation period. If nothing else, you'll learn what you do or don't like to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a comedian, told a few jokes, nobody laughed, and so I needed to change course right away. Let me give you another personal story. I attended Davidson College in North Carolina. Did I have friends in North Carolina? No. Did I have family in North Carolina? No. In fact, I had been to the state maybe once or twice when I was a child for a track meet, but I knew I wanted a good education. I wanted to be in a small town, and I wanted to be out of the city. I majored in history. Why? Because I liked the subject, at least ever since I had been introduced to it by my seventh grade teacher, Mr. Anthony Barnes. But at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life or who or what I wanted to become. So I used the time while in college to get to understand and explore me. What does that mean to you, a number of college students who are trying to decide whether or not you want to pursue a career in law? I did a little of everything. That included taking a course called Edible Wild Plants. Why? Because I was from New York and I had no idea where food came from other than aisle 12 in the supermarket. So for the first time in my life, I saw trees that were so big that I could wrap my arms around them. I saw cows, something that I had never seen before living in the city. I rolled down the windows. Why? Because I had never smelled a skunk and wanted to know what that smelled like. I say that to again remind you that these are the times while you're in college to be exposed to people, exposed to experiences, exposed to opportunities that you may never have been exposed to before. Perhaps your family speaks a different language. Perhaps you grew up with a different culture. These are all okay because these are the differences that will help you in your career in the legal profession. Use again this opportunity to learn as much as you can, to mix with and meet people of different cultures and different experiences. This is a time also when there may be an area that you don't quite succeed, but in fact, you may fail. For instance, I took calculus twice while in college and failed it twice. I knew then that it wasn't likely that I could pursue a career as an economist or an aerospace engineer. I also took time off between college and law school. I did a fellowship at the New York City Urban Fellows, and I worked for a program called the Center of Alternative Sentencing and Alternative Programs. That is what you can do while you are in college to decide whether or not law is the career that you would like to pursue. The what in your life may not be known immediately, but it most certainly will come to you over time. Time. The next question you're asking me is, well, Judge, when? Some of you are ready to go to law school right now, you say. You've taken this conference and now you're fired up and ready to go. But some things, of course, take some time. There's no doubt that the pandemic has appended our lives in a way that no one could have imagined. Time is now marked as BC, before COVID, and AC, which is after COVID. Now, before COVID, you had plans, big plans, plans that may now seem crushed and unfulfilled. But as the poet Langston Hughes wrote, a dream delayed is not a dream deferred. I'll give you another example. When I first applied for judge, I was told that I was too young. Judges needed to be at least 40 years old, they told me, and at the time, I was 35. Some of you are going to be told, you're too old. You should have applied to a particular program or taken a particular course during your freshman year in college, or it's too late in life for that. I'm here to tell you, do not be discouraged or fall prey to limitations as to what you can achieve and when you can achieve it. In this new virtual era, where everyone gets to mute themselves, some may be told, "You're a bit too loud, turn your camera off," or "You're a bit too quiet, turn your camera on." You're blending in the background. The point is, you have to find your own rhythm. You'll know when it's your time to take flight. In doing so, remember that not all planes take off at the same time. Rather, you may have to wait for some things in your life, your own personal runway, to clear. But while you're waiting, there are certain things that will happen. There are moments that will let you know when your time is near. It may be a disruptive moment. We live in a time in our country where there's civil unrest. There are some who have now interested in the legal profession after experiencing on their television screens what happened with George Floyd. Or perhaps there's a personal experience in your life. There was sickness, there was death, some other life-altering, disruptive moment that now has either changed your direction in your life. I sat for 5 years in the New York County Family Court, so I'm aware that something that may not happen directly to you, but to someone in your family, how that can impact your life, such that the plans that you had made can now take a detour. Detours can appear frustrating, but I'm here to tell you that what may seem to be a detour may actually be an opportunity for you to find a different path to get you where you would like to go. There's also a time that may be what they call decisive moments. It's moments like that when you decide, what is it that you're going to do? Do you stay on course? Do you change direction? The important thing is to stay in alignment with who you are, being true to yourself and knowing what it is that you would like to do. It's during those times that you'll find your defining moments, of moments in your life that will give you clarity. Perhaps it was coming to this conference that now, for the first time, you're able to have clarity as to what you would like to do with your life. Once you have that, the question becomes, well, where? Where am I? I've taken a detour and I've landed in what's called compromise land or compare land. What do I mean by that? Compare land means you're comparing yourself to other people. Where are you and what direction you're headed in is something that only you can decide. Where are you mentally, physically, emotionally? Each of you is in a different place and you're on your own respective journey. Finishing law school and becoming an attorney requires a great deal of sacrifice. Some of you may get there a lot sooner than others, and some of you may take different paths. The ultimate goal, however, is that all of you get to that finish line. Once there, you may take different career paths. Some may become litigators, whether it's defense attorneys or prosecutors. Some may go into academia and decide to become law professors. Some of you may decide that you don't want to go into the courtroom at all. The point being is that where you are now in your life is something that's personal to you and that may require a different journey from someone else. One of the things I love the most about being a judge is an opportunity to have visitors to the courtroom, to allow them to observe firsthand the inner workings of our judicial system. And with this virtual platform, I get to bring the courtroom to you. So no matter what state you're in, I get to observe you. No matter what state you're in, you get to observe me and have direct access to the courtroom. So wherever you are now, I hope it takes you to that fifth W, that W being the why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why is it that you want to go to law school? Some of you thought you had the answer to that question, and after attending this conference, it's changed, and you now have a different answer. Or you've asked yourself that question and you're still scratching your head saying, it's changing, even as I'm speaking. Well, when asked, most prospective law school students, when I ask, why do you want to become an attorney? They say, because I like to argue, or I like to talk a lot, or there are some who still say, I like to make a lot of money. They tell me stories about how, as young children, they'd line up their stuffed animals, their dolls, their action figures, and pretend that such figures were part of the jury and that they were presenting their first case to their jury. And of course, in those situations, you always won your case. While there's nothing wrong with these aspirations because you like to argue, because you like to talk a lot, or because you want to make money, I want to also let that person know who's at this conference today to know that the court system's looking for people who like to resolve and settle disputes. We're looking for people whose why they want to go to law school is that they like to help people. We're looking for people whose why is that they like to make sure that there's a difference in someone's life. We're looking for people whose why is that they like to settle and resolve disputes. A number of courts around the country now are requiring people to first go to mediation or arbitration before filing their cases in court. Before I became a judge, I used to volunteer as a small claims arbitrator in night court because it was important to me to try and make a difference in the lives of the people around me. We need also people who like to listen. Listen to the people before them. Listen to how it is that their circumstances have changed in their own lives and what we can do to help them. We need lawyers and other legal professionals who understand that unlike stuffed animals, these cases involve people, real people, people who have feelings, people who have experiences, people with whom you will interact in a way that you can make their lives more impactful. As a child, I used to love doing jigsaw puzzles, and I enjoyed doing it because a jigsaw puzzle allowed me to make order out of chaos. Similarly, in the legal profession, we need people who can take complex situations and make them plain. Make it plain enough so that everyone can understand. Make it plain enough so that people who are self-represented, people who need the breadth and the depth of your legal experience to help them navigate through their circumstance. We need people with courage and compassion, people with integrity, people who are competent and know the law, people who are committed to the rule of law and the principles of our Constitution. Our Constitution that ensures access to justice for all people, no matter of their age, their race, their gender, their socioeconomic status. We need people who care enough and are willing to make a difference. Speaking of differences, you'll notice that my background changed. That's what happens in life unexpectedly sometimes. There are things that happen that disrupt our way of doing things. But because you're in this conference, I know that you're equipped with the skills to press on, press forward, and stay focused on what your goals are. When I was in law school, I saw the educational paradox that Rutgers University, which had this broad campus, a campus that included the law school, the graduate school, all in the same area. But on this amazing campus, or right next to it, there were many students in the surrounding Newark area who had no connection to the university or higher learning. They had no opportunities to even explore what it would mean to go on to college or to graduate school. So what did I do? I established what was called the Sweet Justice Legal Training Program. This was for high school students who, for the first time, were able to go inside a law school, interact with law students, observe a law class, and begin to dream just like many of you are in their aspirations of becoming an attorney. When you're doing what you love, you can do it for hours. And I can speak with you all for hours. When others get bored in just a few minutes, that's when you're doing what you love. No matter how many times you try to walk away, you'll hear the sweet voice of your passion calling you back. When you're doing what you love, the rewards are immeasurable. Now, for those who were keeping track, you know that I went through the 5 W's. But I told you we're going back to the basics. And with 5 W's, it's who, what, where, when, and why. And there's always how. How am I going to make my dreams come true? And I hope that with the how, it really gets you excited. I know that we're in the midst of a pandemic and we're living in a period of economic uncertainty. There's unemployment, there's layoffs. And so your question becomes how? How am I going to pursue my goals of becoming an attorney? How am I going to pursue even my goal of going to law school? Well, I know that you attended this conference. That's number one. And I know also that you attended that workshop on financing your law school. So that you've taken already the first steps. The second step is establishing meaningful and sustainable relationships. I still go back to my pre-kindergarten school called the Mary Walton Children's Center. I still go back to the high school from which I had graduated. My key and my words to you are to pick up enough skills for free today that will make you a master in an area that people will have to pay you to do that work tomorrow. Watch that free podcast. Many of you have your phones, your tablets, you're at home wondering what you can do. Pick up as many skills as possible. As a personal story, I worked at a lot of places. I did a fellowship, studied abroad, volunteered wherever I could. I worked even as a receptionist at a home health agency, the dining hall on the college campus, a law clerk, a referee, you name it. If there was an opportunity for me to hone my skills, I tried to do so. You will note that many of you with your where, you thought that you would be in your college dorms right now, and now you may be back at home. There are some who are at home and are questioning whether or not they could attain their goals of enrolling either in law school or becoming an attorney. I again remind you, it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you finish. And if you remain focused on your goals, most certainly it can be attained. You'll notice that what I'm wearing is what's called a jabot. Some pronounce it a jabot. Many of you may be most familiar with the jabot that was worn by the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She wore hers as an expression of her opinions. Most famously, she wore the crocheted one whenever she issued a majority opinion, and she wore the black and gold one when she had a dissent. But in its simplest form, such as the one that I have, it's a piece of fabric that's connected at the neck. And it reminds you that when you enter the profession, to speak with one tongue, speak with the same tongue for the rich that you speak with for the poor. And this is what I want to remind and encourage all of you to do as you're entering the legal profession. There is so much that you can achieve, so much that you can accomplish, so many questions that you may have, but you have answered them today with your presence, who you are, aspiring lawyers. What it is you want to attain, you want to go to law school. When is it that you want to do it? You'll decide that in your own time. Where will you do it? We're in a virtual platform. You can do it anywhere. Why are you doing it? To make a difference. And how are you going to do it? You're going to be equipped with the support of people such as myself and all of those who have organized this wonderful legal fraternity of Phi Alpha Delta. It's with those great who, what, where, when, why, and how, that recipe of success, that I leave you all now and open the floor for any questions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Judge Sweeting. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. It looks like we've got your video is a little frozen, so we can hear you just fine, but your screen's frozen. But we'll continue with the questions. Everyone, please feel free to put your questions for Judge Sweeting in the chat, and we'll answer them in the order that they're received. If you want your question to remain private, feel free to direct it to me in the chat, and I'll make sure to answer it to ask it on your behalf. We'll start with a few questions that we actually got ahead of time. You've spoken so much about the who, what, when, where, why, and some of the one of the things that this person wanted to know was specifically the who, involving the next generation. How important is it to involve high schoolers, even middle schoolers, current undergraduate students in the legal processes that are going on in this country?
It is critically important that young people who, for the most part, well, let me approach it several ways. In that, again, sitting in the New York County Family Court, I'm particularly sensitive to the needs of young people. It's important that they have access to the court system, not as defendants or as in some cases, their parents may have matters pending before the court, but what a difference it makes to a young person when they come to a courthouse and they say, I have an appointment, not a case, I have an appointment with the judge. So it is really important to me that throughout my legal career, I've ensured that my courtroom is open to people of all ages, so that you can begin at an early stage to interface with court officers, to interface with court reporters, interface with attorneys, to know that there are so many legal opportunities within our court system, and that your role, your place in the court is not simply to that of litigant, but there's so many opportunities within our court system. I have done Take Your Children to Work Day. Our court also has a number of legal training programs. I myself have started one while I was a law student. I use nursery rhymes as a example for how accessible and comprehensive law can be. And for those who are at today's conference, for example, Humpty Dumpty sitting on the wall and had a great fall. Well, was there a sign that said he should not have sat there? Was Humpty Dumpty liable himself because he knew he was fragile as an egg? All of those things are examples of how law does not necessarily have to be as complex or as complicated, but it involves everyday interactions, including our bedtime stories, all have a legal undertone. So I most certainly think the doors of our courtroom should be open. I keep mine open to make it as accessible as possible.
Thank you. That's a really good segue into our next question. What advice would you give to someone who is not so sure that they want to practice law, but do want to go to law school? So for instance, what advice would you give someone who wants to pursue a career in politics with a law degree? And you had mentioned there's so many things to do beyond litigating. I think this is a great segue into that.
The great thing about law is that, as you've indicated, it is transferable in any and every profession. Many people believe, because of our television shows in part, that law is limited simply to the Perry Masons of the world, but it is not. It is the intellectual exercise of critical thinking and analysis. Who would have known that, again, I mentioned to you, taking a class that may have seemed innocuous, such as edible wild plants, how could that in any way have any connection to law? Well, if there was a case wherein someone is now suing, for instance, a restaurant, and they're making claims as to certain foods or that were used, or questioning whether or not certain products are organic or not, most certainly my background in that edible wild plants course becomes relevant. Whether or not you may be interested, say, in sports, well, you would make an outstanding witness or even a drafter of a contract for an athlete. If you love music or art, there are cases as to whether or not the contracts concerning those artists, their copyrights have been protected. I can go on with the number of examples that are so interrelated to law, even if you are not a litigant in the courtroom. The law and its principles most certainly apply. And if there's anyone there who has I'm going to stump the judge with an example of a career course, or I'm going to stump the judge with an area of study or interest that's not related to law, I say, bring it on. I accept the challenge.
Wonderful. Thank you. Our next question, does it matter which law school you go to become a successful lawyer? For example, going to a top tier versus a lower ranked school?
The answer to that question is it's not where you go, it's what you do with your degree when you graduate. There are a number of people who may have gone to our most distinguished universities, Ivy League universities and law schools, and most, well, let's just say there are those who have not, but who have equally committed themselves to the law and its study and its practice, and have become outstanding practitioners or professionals. I use myself, as humbly as I may proclaim, a graduate of none other than the State University, Rutgers University in the state of New Jersey, and here I now sit as an acting justice of the Supreme Court. So it matters not where you go so much as it is how you apply yourself while you're there. I mentioned also, for the most part, law school education is universal. Almost all law students for their first year will study the standard courses of, say, for instance, contracts, criminal law, civil law and procedure. The first year is pretty universal, no matter where it is that you attend law school. The method of teaching, the Socratic method, where they throw out the questions, never quite giving you the answer, but forcing you to critically think about the scenarios and apply the facts to the law. That too is something that's universal. So my response to you, and I had to think through that question when I applied to law schools, do I go to the school of what may have been my choice? My answer was, I'm going to the school that accepts me, that would allow me to grow, to develop, to graduate, to take the bar and pass the bar, and then go on to be a practicing attorney, of which I am now a judge. So the school choice, as long as they're willing to invest in you and you're willing to invest in yourself, go to the school by which you are accepted.
Thank you. Speaking of location, our next question is about your background. You have a certification from a law school in the Bahamas. What is your experience with the way that law is taught or practiced internationally as opposed to the continental U.S.?
Well, there are several differences. We can start both substantively. In countries such as the Caribbean, they follow the British system. And there are some origins of the British system that we still apply here in the United States. But one of the major differences is that they have different tracks. When you go to law school here in the United States, you go to law school, and when you graduate, everyone who graduates is a lawyer, and those who pass the bar are now attorneys. In the Caribbean, as well as under the British system, you go to school to decide, do you wish to be a barrister, meaning someone who speaks in court, or do you wish to be a solicitor, meaning you do not like going to court, but you like to do all of the research and the writing, and your educational studies will be divided accordingly. If you aspire to become a judge, there is a separate method of training for the judge track. So there are 3 tracks under that system: barrister, speaking in court; solicitor, not speaking in court; judge, if you under the British system. In our system, of course, as I mentioned, one legal education, and you can decide by way of practice where you would like for your career to go. There's also some outward differences, starting with the mode of dress. As I've indicated, what I'm wearing, the collar, is a British origin, and it's required under the British system to wear both the wig and the gown. Now, I will tell you, I'm a proponent for that. There are some of you who may have experienced during the pandemic could not get that hair done. Well, if you were on the British system, it mattered not because you'd simply throw on your wig. And if you needed to get to court, you'd simply throw on your gown. Now, with that, and the brief rationale for that is that you should judge cases based on what someone is saying and you're hearing from their mouths and not based on their outward appearance. The origins of the wig and the robe is to be an equalizer. When someone's before the court, you're judging the case not on the person who wears the Brooks Brothers suit thinking, aha, they have a better lawyer. No, all barristers who appear before the court, everyone is equally dressed. And the dress is, again, the robe and the wig. So those are outward practical differences as well as substantive differences between the different practices in different countries.
That's very interesting. Thank you. I'll preface this next question by saying I'm asking it on behalf of someone else, not myself, of course. But as an African-American woman who's aspiring to be an attorney, is it much difficult in the field to succeed compared to others? And how can I overcome these racial obstacles?
Now, the first part I'm going to remind you is don't go to Comparisville. Comparisville is not on the map. Comparisville can be in your heart and it can be in your mind. And by that, while I recognize and understand that most certainly there are a number of racial, gender inequities in the country that we live in, most certainly you must make your plan according to what it is you seek to attain. By way of background as well, I've mentioned that I served in the New York County Family Court. I was only the second African-American woman jurist to sit in that court. The first one being Jane Bolin, who was the first African-American woman judge in the United States. She sat in the New York County Family Court and was appointed in 1939. So it's in the year 2015 that I was then assigned to that court. So there are some firsts. There are still some areas of our legal profession that most certainly can benefit from the diversity of your experience. But I say that with caution. And the caution being is that we most certainly want to make sure we have two things. One is by being a person of color, that you are also a person of conscience. And that by that, it is when you get into a position of authority, or in this case, when you're applying for law school, it's not just that you're there because of your color, but you're there because of your consciousness in which you seek to elevate the profession. And you do so by sharing your experiences as a woman of color in the United States, adding to the discussion in the classroom, enhancing the intellectual exchange from your peers who may not have had your experiences. That's what you're there to do. So I encourage you to dig deep into those experiences that are unique to you, unique to your family, unique to your culture, and sit in that front seat in the classroom. Raise your hand when asked a question. Don't shy away from what may be differences, but use that to season, pepper, and elevate the discussions in the classrooms that you are in.
Thank you so much. One of our next questions is about the virtual aspects of how things are going right now. You already had a virtual legal program that you were administering before COVID, the BC before COVID times, as you mentioned during your talk. Do you think programs like that are going to be more pervasive in our AC after COVID times as well? How do those impact, say, communities that have trouble getting access to legal aid and even access to the courtrooms themselves?
One of the initiatives that is being piloted here in New York is using houses of worship as well as other community spaces as safe centers and accessible centers where people who may not have access to technology can access the internet, they can interface with agency providers, and they can interface with the court that is now virtual. So I have what I would describe as a list of positives from the virtual courts. One of them include one of the most common complaints that I've heard people give about the court is that they're there all day. Mm-hmm. And so now with the virtual court, you pretty much have an appointment. You know when your case is being heard. The other issue is an economic issue. Not everyone is able to come to court. And as you can see, I'm now transformed back into the courtroom. But it imposes an economic hardship on some who are unable to come to court. And so the technology allows you to appear and meet your court obligations without having to travel to court. Here's one of the other advantages. When you appear in court, you have to go through a magnetometer. There are some people who are intimidated by that process, don't want to interact with other court personnel or the confidences of your court proceedings. Courtrooms are open to the public, whereas in a virtual platform, you don't have to go through a metal detector or a magnetometer in order to have your case heard. You don't necessarily have to physically be in the same space if it's a criminal case, for example, with your alleged aggressor. There's child care concerns. Court hours are not necessarily in the evening. You have to take time from work, time from school in order to meet your court appearances. So this virtual platform addresses all of those issues by way of expediency, by way of the economic circumstance, the family circumstance. So there's a number of benefits to the technology. Some of the challenges include your call gets dropped, your Wi-Fi disconnects, no matter how much preparation you did in advance, or your screen freezes in the middle of the trial. And as a fact finder, I decide cases based on credibility. I can't tell if you're laughing or smiling or what's happening if your camera is off. The other issue is confidentiality. How do I know if, for instance, I have someone who is a victim, an alleged victim of domestic violence? How do I know when they're talking to me as the judge from their home that someone isn't standing over their shoulder? Some of the issues with technology not being able to interface with people directly, it can impose some challenges. So the technology should be used for those who may have some of those challenges that I mentioned, economic, finance, childcare, but utilized and available for in-person for those who need it. For this generation, going back to your first question, you all are the courts of the future in that you're fully equipped in knowing how to use the technology. So we as the court are catching up actually with the youth who are accustomed to being on tablets and other devices. Zoom, when I grew up, was a TV show. Zoom now is the universal virtual platform. So that just tells you, for instance, some of the differences generationally.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Thinking about the TV show versus the platform, I imagine not many people make that connection.
I'm not the only one who remembers.
No, I see Andrew over there, not pointing to himself. We do have a few more time for a few more questions, and we do have a few more in the chat here. So we've got one. What or who directed you towards the legal profession?
Remember, I mentioned that it could be a circumstance that leads you to law. Namely, there could have been an incident in your own respective life. Well, in my case, when I was growing up, my coach, I grew up in the Polo Grounds houses, and my coach, who was the youngest in the country, his name was Kevin Eugene Moore. He had been killed in the same housing development that I grew up in. So remember, I mentioned that sometimes it can be a disruptive moment, a disruptive event that changes your entire perspective. And it changed my perspective in that there was no prosecution or investigation into his death. And I wondered, why did that not happen? What is it about my community that I can change? What role can I play to ensure that similarly situated young people have a different perspective on life, opportunities that they may not have thought were available? So it was as the result of a disruptive moment that I think the seed for a career in law was planted. He himself had wanted to become an attorney and was a student at Fordham University. So I believe it was at that moment that it may have subliminally been planted in my head. And it was through mentors, people who have encouraged me through the years, not necessarily to pursue a career in law, but to pursue what I enjoy, which includes reading books, which includes analyzing things, which includes with my nerdy glasses, investigating and getting to the root of things. It's all of those things that collectively resulted in my pursuing a career in law, but that was not my immediate, straight out of the womb, I watched Perry Mason and knew it moment. It was a collection of experiences.
That's, I think, an excellent segue into what will probably be our final question of the session today. With all of that, with your defining moment, with what pushed you forward, how does it feel now to have achieved what you've achieved? Is where you are now where you expected to be?
The place where I'm most comfortable is a place that allows me to be positioned close enough to those who I can help, reach down toward and pull up. It's being in a place that I'm high enough to reach those who may have attained aspirations and goals greater than my own, just to learn the lessons that they've learned and then share them with those behind me. I see my life really as a relay. How is it that I can pass the baton that may have been given to me to someone else? When I was 9 years old, my mother gave me what was called a diary. When I got older, it became fancy. I call it a journal. And so I've been recording since I was 9 years old, just daily events in life. Not so much for myself, but when someone asks the question as to who, what, when, why, and how were you able to do what you did or what you're doing, I don't have to give them the sugar-coated version of hindsight. but I can look to those books and pass on to them exactly what it was I was experiencing, the insecurity that I may have gone through, times when I thought and wanted to quit, times when, as one of your questioners asked, when I thought that I could not transcend what appeared to be obstacles due to my race, my gender, and even in my case, my zip code. Those are the things that give me joy. Those are the things that make me want to move forward, not for myself, but to be in even a greater position where I can make even more of a difference and that I can open the door of opportunity for someone else. I have to move on to another position. Why? Because there's someone in the waiting to fill the position that I'm in currently. That's what gives me the most joy, and that's what I like to attain and gives me happiness in what I do.
Wonderful. I know I said that would be the last one, but we got a couple requests for one more question. Everybody would like to know if you have a favorite book or a book you would recommend.
Oh, wow. There's so many. Oh, I should look to my bookshelf. There one that strikes most recently. There's a book called Detours by Tony Evans, is one of my favorites. A very powerful book that I read at a crossroad in my own life where I wasn't sure what's happening. Wasn't sure if there was a what's next. Wasn't quite assured of the step I was on. And I read a book called Detours by Tony Evans. There's a whole host of books. I have a library of them all, and I feel as though I'd be cheating on my authors to say that I have a love greater than any one of them, but I will most certainly put together a top 10 list and I will share them with you because I do get a lot of inspiration from books, and books have been my best friend. They have been my passport. I was able to transcend my circumstances by escaping through a book. They have been my alter ego and personality because I take on characters after reading certain books. So absolutely, I have several that I will make sure that I share with you, and they're different genres as well. I would be remiss if I did not mention spiritually. During the pandemic, I read the entire Bible from beginning to end. And boy, those 66 books all in one were quite intriguing. So that most certainly would be on the book of books, but then that would be 66. So I'll stick to the real top 10. Okay.
That sounds great. And please feel free to send me that top 10 list. And when we get our recording set, we'll post that along with the recording for all of our attendees. So thank you so much. We received so many great comments from people, some private, some public, but just saying how excited they were to hear you speak, and for people in their own personal ways that they can relate to you, whether they grew up with a disability or currently have a disability, whether they are also African American, and they can just to hear you speak. It's been wonderful. So thank you so much on behalf of all of us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And most certainly, I extend to you. You have my information, and it's something that I shared at the beginning. I go back to my pre-K school and stay in contact with all of my teachers. And it's important that when we say networking, and that's not a phrase or word necessarily that I like so much, because it's taken on, I give you my card, you give me your card, and the two never meet, except perhaps in the fishbowl of cards. So I say it most earnestly, for those of this most esteemed fraternity, of whom you have questions that you said, I'm not sure if I want to share, but it's a pressing question, or even not so pressing. The doors of my court are virtual. and I remain available to you. And I thank you all for what you're doing to inspire and uplift a new generation of lawyers. I look forward to welcoming you all to the bar.